Fader up. Zoom in. There we go. Hey, this is Joe from Home Studio Corner, and today we're going to talk about the 4 rules of recording. But I'm going to need some help. Hold on a second. This is Owen, my son. Say hi, Owen.
Hi.
Okay. I need visual aids, Owen. I need you to take these sticky notes and draw me a guitar amp, a person wearing headphones, and a microphone. Can you handle it?
Yes.
Deal. Let's do it. Look at all this. This is perfect. We'll get to these in a minute, but we're going to stay the course and talk about our 4 rules of recording. So rule number 1 is really simple. And I've talked about, I've done a lot of these rules for EQ and compression and mixing, and all that's really important. But recording, obviously, we can't mix anything until something's been recorded, and I've neglected to talk about that too much. So the first rule is really simple, and it's just a habit that you need to establish whenever you're recording things. Now, when I talk about recording, I'm generally talking about using things like microphones in front of real instruments and recording them. This certainly applies if you're doing a lot of MIDI production, but that's where I'm coming from, just so you know. But the idea is very simple. Record something, then stop, put the instrument down, get out of here, and then listen back to what you've recorded. And when I say listen back, I mean, generally what I mean is put the headphones down, like headphones down, and listen back on your speakers. If that's how you primarily listen to music, if that's how you're going to be mixing is on speakers, you need to listen to what you recorded on speakers. Now, this is annoying, right? Because generally you have your speakers off during recording because you don't want feedback. And that means you're going to have to mute your microphones, turn the speakers on, and listen, and then mute the microphone again, and then go back, put your headphones on, and record. It adds more work, more effort. It would be nice to just sit there with your headphones on and play all day until the recordings are all done. How do I know? Because that's what I did. On my first album called Out of Indiana, I sat for an entire day in my apartment in Fort Wayne, Indiana at the time. I'm in Nashville now. And I recorded a bunch of acoustic guitar tracks for something like 10 songs. It was a marathon session. I was crushing it. I was super proud of myself. Came back the next day and listened, and this is what my face looked like. Because the guitars were too boomy. I had not done the first rule. I had not recorded a take of something and then listened back on speakers. I listened to them on these blasted headphones, which are fine for recording. They're a necessary thing. But I ended up very sad because I did not follow this rule, and I had guitars that weren't as good as they could have been had I just listened and said, oh, let me adjust those microphones a little bit. Okay? So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2, speaking of microphones, is to EQ with the mic. Okay? Now we're going to use some visual aids. Here is a microphone that Owen so graciously drew for us. Here is a guitar plugged into an amp. Look, we even made a cable for it. So let's grab our microphone. And this works really with anything. There's a thing in physics and audio and microphones called the proximity effect. It means the closer something gets to a source, the more bass that microphone is going to record. If it is a directional microphone, meaning one that picks up in one particular direction, like most microphones do, then as you get closer to the source, that source is going to have more and more of a bigger bass response. So from a nice distance, it's pretty flat, and then as you get closer, this low end of the EQ curve gets higher and higher, which means you can treat your microphone as an EQ. If things sound too boomy, let's back the microphone away. If things sound too thin and aren't warm enough, let's move the microphone closer. In addition to changing where the microphone is facing, is it over here, is it over here, is it up here, is it down here? You can make all those changes, but you can also adjust the distance to get vastly different sounds without using a single plugin, just by moving the microphone. This applies to guitars, this applies to amps, this certainly applies to vocals, and anything else you put a microphone in front of. As you adjust the distance, you're adjusting the quote-unquote EQ of that thing. Do that to get it sounding more like you want it to sound, and you'll thank yourself. Which leads us, of course, to our third point. They're right here. Our third rule is simply this, and you knew this was coming. You can probably say it with me. Get it right at the source. Everything I'm talking about is about getting it right at the source. Play a game with yourself. Make it into a game where you are not allowed to use plugins. Like, pretend that someone is holding a gun to your head. That's violent. Someone is threatening you. Nope, that's violent. Someone is telling you, hey, I'll pay you $1,000 if you can record this song and mix it down without any plugins. 0 plugins. Make it sound as good as possible. Now, of course, we don't have to do that. That's a silly scenario, but you get the idea. If I record this so well that I listen down to the raw tracks, back when we're doing our listening over here, and it sounds amazing, guess what? The mix is going to be infinitely better. Sure, we can do lots of fun things in mixing, and I talk about those all the time. But unless this happens, we're going to have our hands tied behind our back when we go to mix something. But if we get it right at the source, if we play that game of how great can I make this sound from scratch, our mixes are going to be so much better. And finally, rule number 4, and this one's I just have to say it. Rule number 4, have fun. If everything I'm telling you sounds like a lot of work, it is. But it's fun work, right? It's worth stopping and listening and saying, oh, that performance was amazing, but that recording isn't quite right. Let me go move the microphone to a better position so that I can get it right at the source, because ultimately that's the most fun. So then when I come back to mixing's going to be more fun because I took the time to get it right first and to follow these different rules that Joe told me to follow. Also, kind of a sub-corollary to this, you should know that do-overs are normal, okay? It is normal for you to say, that just wasn't good enough. I'm going to take this and throw it out and do it again. That's completely normal. It happens all the time. Even if I've done this before, I've spent an entire day with a guitar and an amp and a microphone recording guitars, and I come back the next day and I say, blah, this is terrible. I'm going to throw all this away and I'm going to record it again. And that's normal. We hope it doesn't happen, but it does, and that's okay. And you can still have fun while doing it. Those moments aren't necessarily fun, but it's totally normal. Don't feel like you're the weirdo who messes things up. We all do. Everybody does, for real. All right, big thanks to Owen for all his amazing drawings that I ended up tearing up and throwing away for effect. Last thing, if you haven't already, check out my recording cheat sheet at recordingcheatsheet.com. It's a great read that talks about a lot of this stuff and puts it into a little more context. And it's a nice longer piece that I wrote, a longer group of essays about different mistakes that we make when we record and how to fix them. Thanks so much for watching. I'm really thankful for you. Leave a comment. Love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Later.